Okay, hi all, welcome to my kitchen. Today is Tuesday, February 14th. It's also known as Valentine's Day. This is going to be a multi-day video. You're going to watch the entire Valentine's Day meal multiple days. Part of the first half of the videos that you guys have seen were on the sweet sour cabbage. And I made the sweet sour cabbage yesterday to allow the cabbage to get its flavors and to just taste better. So today we're going to do the last two things for the meal. And that's, we're going to make my grandmother's bread dumplings. And this goes back generations, all the way to when my great-grandmother was in Czechoslovakia. And we're going to make a pork loin roast. It's 1:06 right now, so my husband wants a little bit later of a dinner tonight. He said, let's shoot for about 6:30, 7 o'clock. The pork loin roast takes 2 hours to bake. So I'm not going to pull the pork roast out of the refrigerator until about 4 o'clock, because the pork loin roast does not need to necessarily sit out for hours. I'm just going to pull it out about half an hour to 45 minutes before I'm going to bake it. The dumplings, however, there are some steps that you can do ahead of time. And you can make dumplings days ahead of time. You can make them weeks ahead of time. They do freeze beautifully. They're a little bit tricky to make though. But there's only 4 main ingredients in the dumpling recipe that my grandmother has used, my great-grandmother has used, and I have used. So, let's get started with that. First things first, before you do anything, you are going to need a fairly deep pot. And this is one of the pots that I use for dumplings. My husband was so graciously, he put my other one down, but I'm actually going to grab it. We talked about pots before, but you can do dumplings in this. The only problem is this type of pot versus this type of pot. Your dumplings are going to be more prone to sticking on the bottom of the pan and won't have a lot of room to maneuver, and they need to boil for 25 minutes to cook all the way through. So it's always good to have a deep pot for dumplings. If you make soup and you have a soup pot, that is the perfect size pot. Now when I do dumplings, I always double the recipe so that I have dumplings for other things, or if I know I'm making dumplings today and I have another holiday that's coming up in a month, and my husband out of the blue says he wants either a duck or he wants turkey or he wants chicken paprikash, I have the dumplings already made. I can take them out of the freezer. I can steam them and they'll be just as good as when I make them fresh today. So I double the recipe. So today's video, you're going to see the recipe doubled. I am actually going to give you the recipe as it was originally written in its single form. And I'm going to do that right now so you guys are not confused about it. So, for one batch of dumplings, and this should feed a couple of people. It should feed at least 2. You might have a little bit of leftovers. It should make about 1 to 2 bowls of dumplings. It's going to be 1.5 cups of milk, 3.5 cups of all-purpose flour, 2 eggs, and 3 slices of cubed dry bread, and 1 teaspoon of salt. Now, like I said, when you watch me do it, I have doubled the recipe. So I'm using 4 eggs, 3 cups of flour, and I'm using almost 8 cups wait, let me go back there. 3 cups of milk, 4 eggs, 8 cups of flour because it's been doubled. Now we're going to talk about the bread cubes. And my husband has done this, and when you do this, you can do this months ahead of time. You can do this at Thanksgiving. Or if you guys are finding yourselves that you have stale loaf bread in white. White is the preference bread. You can do this with the French bread. You can do this with a Vienna bread. However, if you do that, using those 2 types of bread, your dumplings may be a little bit tough. And they also, if you've put anything on the bread or the bread is seasoned, your dumplings are going to take that taste that seasoning. So what I do is I use just a plain ordinary loaf of white bread. And usually, if I have white bread that isn't being used in the house, that's kind of on the old side and I bought fresh, I'll actually use that and I'll dry it in the oven, cube it, and put it in bags like this. So I'm going to try to get in close. You're going to see the bread cubes, and I'm actually going to take some of these out. Let's see. You're going to want your bread cubes cubed. And like I said, you can do this way ahead of time. You can do this months, weeks. I don't even know how long this has been sitting in the cabinet. But you want them to be fully dried, and you want them to be white bread. Now, if you don't have dried bread cubes like this, don't fret. You can actually dry bread the same day. Just put your oven on about 200 degrees. Put your bread in for about 10 minutes. You're going to want to check it so that your bread's not getting burnt. But you can dry it in the oven and stuff. You can also sometimes, and more so around Thanksgiving, you can go down your aisle that sells stuffing, the packaged stuffing, not the stovetop stuffing, but the bag stuffing. That's what I meant to say, the bag stuffing. You can sometimes find plain bread cubes. But sometimes, and that's usually around the Thanksgiving holiday. So it doesn't hurt to have that. Anyway, about an hour to 2 hours before you start to make the dumplings, take your eggs and measure out your milk. You want your milk to be room temperature. I'm not going to start this until it's only 1:15 here. Husband wants to eat about 6:37, so I'm not going to start making the dumplings until about 4:30, 5 o'clock, but I'll start getting my ingredients out. Now, I have always said having multiple measuring cups are great. This is a 4-cup measuring cup, and you can get these at any store. I know Target sells them. I'm now anti-Walmart, but Walmart sells them. You can get them at almost any kitchen store. But you're going to want one that is fairly big because you're going to whisk your eggs into this eventually. And I'm going to go ahead and measure out 3 cups of flour. And I'm just double checking my recipe. Yep, 3 cups of flour. By the way, when I said that the original recipe used 3.5 cups of flour, I did a whole series when I first started filming in January for the new year of my kitchen that we were going to be a cooking channel. I talked about flour. So go back, if you're unsure about flours, go back and watch and see what I said about flours. But you may actually need more. You may need less flour. And when I do this, you're going to see what I mean about different types of flowers during their seasons. So, I'm going to pause this. I'll be right back.